Ever wondered why a samurai could kill a modern black belt in under 3 seconds? What if I told you that despite all our advanced training methods, nutrition science, and combat sports evolution, a samurai from 600 years ago would absolutely destroy today's most elite fighters? We've been sold a lie about modern martial arts superiority. While we celebrate UFC champions and Olympic martial artists, the uncomfortable truth is that these modern warriors would be helpless children against a true samurai swordsman, not because of mystical powers or Hollywood magic, but because of a fundamental difference in what their training was designed to accomplish. Modern martial arts focus on sport, fitness, and self-defense. Samurai swordsmanship was engineered purely for efficient killing. Every technique, every training method, every philosophical principle was optimized for one terrifying purpose: ending human life as quickly and completely as possible. The gap between ancient lethality and modern combat isn't just significant. It's a chasm so wide that no amount of contemporary training could bridge it. We're about to expose why no modern fighter, regardless of their skill level, belt rank, or championship titles, could survive 30 seconds against a master of traditional samurai swordsmanship. The reasons why will fundamentally change how you view modern fighting. But first, let's expose the shocking truth about what modern martial arts are actually designed for. The fundamental flaw in modern combat training. Here's the dirty secret nobody wants to admit. Modern martial arts are entertainment disguised as combat training. Every popular fighting system today has been neutered, sanitized, and transformed into something that would make ancient warriors laugh before they killed you. Take mixed martial arts, supposedly the pinnacle of modern combat effectiveness. Fighters train for months to survive 15 to 25 minutes in a controlled environment with a referee, medical staff, and safety regulations. They practice techniques designed to win points, secure submissions, or achieve knockouts within artificial rule systems that have nothing to do with actual life or death combat. Compare that to samurai training, where every session assumed you had seconds to kill or be killed. No rounds, no breaks, no protective gear, and absolutely no guarantee you'd survive the training itself. UFC fighters optimize for endurance across multiple rounds. Samurai were optimized for ending fights within the first exchange of techniques. Boxing exemplifies this fundamental flaw perfectly. Boxers develop incredible hand-eye coordination, footwork, and conditioning to deliver and absorb punishment over 12 rounds. But strip away the gloves, the ring, the rules against clinching, and suddenly these athletes become vulnerable to techniques they've never encountered. A samurai's sword work would end the fight before a boxer could land a single punch. Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners pride themselves on ground fighting mastery, but their entire art assumes you'll have time to execute complex positions and submissions. In real combat with weapons, going to the ground means immediate death. No samurai would ever voluntarily enter a position where they couldn't access their sword or maintain mobility. Even traditional martial arts like karate and taekwondo have been corrupted by sports competition. These arts now emphasize flashy techniques that score points in tournaments rather than practical methods for quickly disabling opponents. The spinning kicks and elaborate forms look impressive but would get you killed against someone trained to end fights with single efficient strikes. The psychological problem runs deeper than techniques. Modern fighters train knowing they'll survive every encounter. They develop pain tolerance, not pain elimination. They learn to fight through injuries, not to avoid them entirely. Combat sports reward taking damage to deliver damage, creating a mentality that would be suicidal against a weapon-wielding opponent. Samurai trained with the absolute certainty that every combat encounter would likely end in death, either theirs or their opponents. This created entirely different mental conditioning, where techniques weren't about winning or losing, but about killing efficiently enough to survive. Weight classes and gender divisions in modern combat create artificial fairness that doesn't exist in real violence. Samurai training assumed you'd face opponents of any size, strength, or skill level, often multiple opponents simultaneously. Modern fighters specialize in facing opponents within narrow physical parameters, leaving them unprepared for the chaos of unrestricted combat. But here's where it gets truly disturbing, when we examine what samurai swordsmanship was actually designed to accomplish. Before we dive into the details, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to our channel. The terrifying reality of samurai combat philosophy. While modern martial artists train to win competitions, samurai trained for a single, horrifying purpose: killing human beings as efficiently as possible. This wasn't just a different approach to combat, it was a completely different understanding of what combat meant. The foundation of samurai swordsmanship was the killing first mentality. Every technique, every stance, every breathing pattern was optimized to end human life within the first few seconds of combat. There were no defensive strategies in the way modern fighters understand defense. Every defensive movement contained a simultaneous lethal attack designed to kill opponents while they attempted to strike. This philosophy created warriors who viewed combat not as a contest to be won, but as a problem to be solved through the immediate elimination of threats. Modern fighters think about winning rounds, controlling opponents, or achieving dominant positions. Samurai thought about which cutting angle would sever the most vital organs in a single strike. Bushido, the samurai code of honor, wasn't about noble warrior ideals as Hollywood portrays it. The code was a psychological framework designed to optimize killing efficiency by eliminating hesitation, fear, and moral constraints. The emphasis on honor and duty created warriors who could kill without emotional interference or ethical delays. Ritual suicide training wasn't just about honor, it was practical combat preparation. By regularly contemplating and preparing for their own death, samurai eliminated the survival instinct that makes normal people hesitate in life or death situations. They could commit fully to attacks that might result in mutual death because they'd already accepted dying as an acceptable outcome. The one-cut philosophy, Ichi no Tachi, represented the ultimate expression of this mindset. Samurai were trained to end every fight with a single perfect strike that would kill opponents instantly. Not disable, not wound, not create an advantage for follow-up techniques. Kill, immediately, completely. This created combat methods that modern fighters literally cannot comprehend. Every technique assumed the opponent would die within seconds of combat beginning. There was no concept of pacing, energy conservation, or strategic development over time. Every movement was designed to end the fight immediately. Weapon integration made this philosophy even more deadly. Samurai weren't martial artists who happened to use weapons. They were weapons specialists who used their bodies as extensions of cutting tools. Their entire physical development, mental conditioning, and technical training revolved around maximizing sword-based killing efficiency. Modern fighters train multiple martial arts and try to integrate them into well-rounded skill sets. Samurai mastered multiple weapon systems simultaneously, creating seamless transitions between katana, wakizashi, tanto, bow, and spear depending on combat distance. They weren't learning different arts. They were mastering different aspects of the same killing system. Historical combat records prove this wasn't theoretical. Documented accounts describe single samurai killing dozens of opponents in individual battles. Miyamoto Musashi never lost a single duel in over 60 encounters, most ending in his opponent's death within the first exchange. Survival rates in samurai duels approached 0% because the techniques were designed to make survival impossible. The psychological impact on opponents was calculated and devastating. Samurai deliberately cultivated reputations for supernatural combat ability. Through systematic demonstration of killing efficiency that seemed to transcend human limitations. Enemies would flee rather than face samurai in combat, understanding that survival was unlikely regardless of their skill level. But how do you actually create warriors capable of such devastating philosophical commitment to killing? The answer lies in training methods so brutal and comprehensive that they would horrify modern society. Methods that systematically broke down and rebuilt human beings into perfect instruments of death. Training methods that created perfect killing machines. What created warriors capable of such devastating effectiveness? Training methods so extreme and comprehensive that they reconstructed human beings from the ground up, creating killing machines that operated beyond normal human limitations. Physical conditioning began in early childhood with systematic pain tolerance development. Young samurai were subjected to deliberate injury and discomfort to eliminate pain responses that might interfere with combat effectiveness. They learned to function normally while experiencing levels of physical distress that would incapacitate modern athletes. Daily training sessions involved thousands of cutting repetitions, practicing identical movements until muscle memory bypassed conscious thought entirely. Modern fighters train techniques until they become automatic responses. Samurai trained until their bodies could execute perfect killing techniques while their minds were unconscious or focused on other tactical considerations. The psychological conditioning was even more extreme. Meditation practices weren't about inner peace or spiritual development. They were about eliminating empathy, hesitation, and moral constraints that might interfere with efficient killing. Samurai learned to view human bodies, including their own, as tactical resources to be utilized rather than lives to be preserved. Visualization training used actual combat scenarios with human targets. Students would spend hours mentally rehearsing specific killing techniques against different opponent types, ingraining response patterns that would activate automatically in real combat. This wasn't theoretical. They practiced on condemned criminals regularly to understand how techniques affected real human bodies. Realistic combat simulation involved training with live blades under conditions designed to inflict actual injuries. Students expected to be cut, stabbed, and wounded during training as preparation for battlefield conditions. The goal wasn't to avoid injury, but to maintain fighting effectiveness while injured, bleeding, and in pain. The master-student relationship eliminated modern concepts of safety and student welfare. Teachers were expected to kill students who couldn't achieve lethal proficiency, both to prevent weak warriors from dishonoring the school and to provide realistic training conditions where failure meant death. Weapon mastery integration meant simultaneous training with multiple weapon systems from childhood. Students mastered integrated weapon systems where techniques flowed seamlessly between different tools depending on combat distance and tactical requirements. Combat scenarios assumed multiple armed opponents simultaneously. While modern fighters trained primarily for one-on-one encounters, samurai prepared for battlefield conditions where they'd face numerous enemies at once. This required techniques for managing multiple threats and killing efficiently enough to reduce numbers quickly. Environmental training prepared warriors for combat under any conditions. They practiced in darkness on uneven terrain, in confined spaces, while mounted or on foot, in all weather conditions. Modern fighters train in controlled environments with optimal lighting, flat surfaces, and comfortable temperatures. The mental reconditioning was perhaps most important. Students learned to view killing as a technical skill rather than an emotional or moral act. They developed psychological frameworks that eliminated hesitation, guilt, or emotional interference that might affect performance during combat. This created warriors who could kill efficiently while remaining mentally clear and tactically focused. And if you think the training was brutal, wait until you discover the actual combat techniques that turned human bodies into disconnected pieces. Combat techniques that made death inevitable. The techniques that emerged from this brutal training system were unlike anything modern fighters could comprehend. These weren't martial arts moves designed to score points or achieve submissions. They were engineering solutions to the problem of ending human life as efficiently as possible. Distance and timing mastery Mae gave samurai the ability to control combat space with mathematical precision. They could calculate exactly when opponents would enter killing range and deliver fatal strikes before enemies could react or defend. This wasn't about having good timing. It was about understanding human movement patterns so completely that combat became predictable. Modern fighters react to what opponents do. Samurai created situations where opponents had no choice but to move into positions where they could be killed. They controlled distance, timing, and positioning to eliminate variables and create inevitable outcomes. Combat became less about fighting and more about manipulating opponents into optimal killing positions. Simultaneous attack-defense systems, Kiryotoshi, eliminated the separation between offensive and defensive techniques that modern fighters understand. Every defensive movement contained a lethal counterattack component, meaning that blocking or parrying an attack would result in the attacker's immediate death. There was no such thing as pure defense because every defensive technique was also a killing technique. This created scenarios where opponents couldn't attack without dying, couldn't defend without creating openings for follow-up kills, and couldn't retreat without exposing themselves to pursuit and elimination. Every option available to opponents led to their death through different technical pathways. Psychological warfare integration went beyond intimidation to actual mental control of opponents. Sen no Sen, attacking the opponent's intention before physical action, allowed samurai to kill people for thinking about attacking. They developed the ability to read micro-expressions, body language, and physiological indicators that revealed opponent intentions before conscious decision-making occurred. This created combat situations where opponents died before they realized they'd decided to attack. The psychological impact was devastating. Facing someone who could kill you for hostile thoughts created mental paralysis that made physical resistance impossible. The circular death pattern, Enshin cutting techniques, generated perpetual motion that trapped opponents in continuous killing sequences. Each strike created momentum for the following attacks, with the blade trajectory designed to position perfectly for immediate follow-up cuts. Opponents found themselves facing endless cutting motions where defending against one strike only positioned them optimally for the next cut. Modern fighters think about combinations as a series of separate techniques. Samurai developed cutting patterns that were single, continuous motions flowing through multiple killing techniques without pause or separation. The blade never stopped moving and opponents never had opportunities to recover, counter, or escape. Multiple opponent systems treated group combat as sequential individual kills rather than chaotic melees. Positioning techniques used opponents against each other, creating situations where enemies blocked each other's attacks and movements. Killing patterns eliminated multiple targets in a single motion, using blade geometry to cut through several opponents simultaneously. Tactical approaches focused on reducing numbers quickly rather than engaging in prolonged combat. The goal was to kill opponents faster than they could coordinate attacks, using superior technique and positioning to prevent effective group tactics. Weapon draw techniques, iaijutsu, could kill opponents during the motion of drawing the sword from its scabbard. Combat ended before opponents realized fighting had begun with draw speeds that exceeded human reaction capabilities. These techniques eliminated the concept of preparation time, making the transition from peaceful interaction to completed killing instantaneous. The psychological impact was calculated. Opponents couldn't defend against attacks they didn't know were coming, and the speed of execution created supernatural impressions that destroyed enemy morale before battles began. cutting techniques targeted specific anatomical structures to ensure immediate death rather than gradually weakening opponents. Samurai studied human anatomy to understand which cuts would sever vital organs, major blood vessels, or structural components that maintained life. They didn't slash randomly, they cut specific targets that would cause rapid death or immediate incapacitation. This created technical precision that modern fighters can't match. Every cut had a specific purpose and expected result, with backup techniques ready if initial strikes didn't achieve complete kills. Combat became surgical rather than chaotic, with each movement designed to solve specific problems in the most efficient manner possible. These techniques created killing efficiency so perfect that even modern military training can't replicate the results. The battlefield testing that proved superiority. The true test of samurai swordsmanship wasn't in controlled training environments. It was on battlefields where these techniques created documented results that seem impossible by modern combat standards. Historical records provide clear evidence that samurai achieved killing efficiency that contemporary fighters cannot approach. The Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 provides detailed documentation of individual combat effectiveness. Single samurai consistently killed dozens of opponents in individual encounters, with some master swordsmen accounting for over 50 enemy deaths in single battles. These weren't random melees, they were systematic eliminations where superior technique translated directly into overwhelming tactical advantage. Witness accounts describe combat that seemed to violate physical laws. Samurai moved through enemy formation so quickly that opponents couldn't track their positions, appearing to be in multiple locations simultaneously. Cutting patterns so efficient that entire groups of enemies would collapse before understanding they'd been attacked. The Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281 provide a comparative analysis against experienced warriors from other cultures. Mongol cavalry was among the most effective military forces in history, with combat experience across Asia and Europe. Yet Japanese defenders using traditional swordsmanship consistently defeated Mongol units in individual combat, forcing the invaders to adapt their entire tactical approach to avoid close-quarters fighting with samurai. Mongol records describe Japanese warriors as supernaturally effective in personal combat, requiring numerical advantages of 10 to 1 or greater to achieve victory. Single samurai would charge into groups of mounted warriors and emerge victorious, leaving behind horses and riders cut into pieces. The Mongols, experienced in warfare against diverse opponents, had never encountered individual fighters capable of such devastating effectiveness. Documented duel records provide statistical evidence of samurai superiority. Miyamoto Musashi's 61 consecutive victories represent more than personal skill. They demonstrate systematic technical advantages that made defeat virtually impossible. Most duels ended with the opponent's death within the first exchange of techniques, indicating that survival against master-level swordsmanship was essentially impossible. Sasaki Kojiro's reputation for instantaneous killing techniques wasn't a legend. It was documented tactical capability. His signature technique could kill opponents during the time required to draw and begin attacking, eliminating combat before it could develop. This wasn't luck or supernatural ability, it was engineering precision applied to human elimination. Weapon effectiveness comparisons reveal why samurai techniques were superior to other martial traditions. European longswords required multiple strikes to achieve kills, creating extended combat that allowed for defensive responses and counterattacks. Chinese Dao and Jian techniques emphasized control and positioning over immediate lethality, creating tactical approaches that samurai could exploit. Archaeological evidence from battlefield remains shows wound patterns consistent with single-strike kills. Skeletal evidence reveals cuts that severed multiple vital structures simultaneously, indicating cutting precision that modern forensic analysis confirms would cause immediate death. European battlefield remains show multiple wound patterns indicating prolonged combat, while Japanese sites reveal evidence of systematic, efficient killing. Korean and Southeast Asian martial traditions proved consistently inferior when tested against samurai techniques. Historical accounts of conflicts between Japanese forces and regional opponents demonstrate overwhelming tactical advantages that resulted from superior individual combat capability. These weren't matters of courage, numbers, or equipment. They were technical superiority and killing efficiency. Combat scenario analysis reveals samurai effectiveness across different tactical situations. Urban warfare in Japanese castle towns where confined spaces and architectural obstacles limited movement still favored samurai because their techniques were designed for efficient killing regardless of environmental constraints. Open battlefield effectiveness against cavalry and infantry demonstrated adaptability that modern fighters couldn't match. Naval combat aboard ships provided particularly challenging conditions where movement was restricted and footing was uncertain. Yet samurai maintained their combat effectiveness because their techniques were based on biomechanical principles that remained constant regardless of environmental variables. Modern fighters train for optimal conditions and suffer reduced effectiveness when circumstances change. The psychological impact documentation reveals systematic use of combat demonstrations as military tactics. Enemy forces would flee upon witnessing samurai combat capabilities, understanding that survival was unlikely regardless of numerical advantages. Diplomatic records describe samurai combat demonstrations as more effective than actual military threats for achieving political objectives. Foreign visitor accounts provide an outside perspective on samurai combat effectiveness. Portuguese, Dutch, and Chinese observers consistently describe Japanese swordsmanship as superior to martial traditions in their own cultures. These weren't biased Japanese sources, they were objective evaluations by experienced military observers. Training effectiveness validation shows successful transmission of techniques across multiple generations. Master swordsmen maintained combat effectiveness into advanced age, indicating that skills were based on technical precision rather than physical attributes that decline over time. Modern fighters peak physically and then decline, while samurai seem to improve with experience. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We actually understand why modern fighters can't achieve this level of effectiveness. Why modern training cannot create this level of lethality. The gap between samurai swordsmanship and modern martial arts exists for specific, measurable reasons that reveal why contemporary training methods cannot create equivalent killing effectiveness. Understanding these limitations exposes uncomfortable truths about what we've chosen to prioritize in modern combat training. Ethical and legal constraints prevent modern training from replicating the conditions that created samurai effectiveness. Contemporary safety regulations, human rights considerations, and legal frameworks eliminate the possibility of training methods that involved actual human targets, expected student deaths, or systematic injury as learning tools. Modern training is constrained by liability concerns that would have been meaningless to samurai. Insurance requirements, medical supervision, and injury prevention protocols create artificial training environments that bear no resemblance to actual combat conditions. Students learn techniques under conditions designed to prevent harm rather than prepare for deadly encounters. Sport versus survival mentality creates fundamental differences in training objectives. Modern martial arts are designed for competition within rule systems that emphasize control, technique demonstration, and athlete safety. Point systems, weight classes, and time limits create artificial scenarios that have no relationship to life or death combat. This produces fighters optimized for controlled environments rather than chaotic violence. Modern champions excel within specific rule systems but lack preparation for encounters where there are no rules, referees, or safety equipment. They train to win competitions, not to kill efficiently. Weapon training gaps represent perhaps the most significant limitation. Modern martial arts are predominantly unarmed fighting systems with weapon training relegated to specialized schools that emphasize sport applications rather than combat effectiveness. Legal restrictions prevent realistic weapon combat training, eliminating the foundation that made samurai swordsmanship so devastating. Physical conditioning differences reflect modern understanding of exercise science and injury prevention that actually reduces certain combat advantages. Contemporary training is designed to optimize performance while minimizing injury risk, creating athletes who are physically impressive but lack the pain tolerance and damage resistance that made samurai effective. Cultural context loss eliminates the social framework that supported samurai development. The society that created samurai no longer exists. Constant warfare, acceptance of death as normal, and social structures that rewarded killing efficiency have been replaced by systems that prioritize life preservation and individual welfare. Psychological training limitations reflect contemporary understanding of mental health that contradicts the conditioning required for samurai-level effectiveness. Modern psychology recognizes that the mental reconditioning necessary to create efficient killers causes psychological damage that modern society considers unacceptable. Technical knowledge gaps exist because original samurai combat knowledge was lost during centuries of peace following the end of feudal warfare. The master-student transmission chains that preserved authentic techniques were broken permanently when the samurai class was abolished and sword fighting became ceremonial rather than practical. The uncomfortable truth is that modern society could theoretically recreate samurai training methods if we were willing to accept the human cost. We choose not to replicate these methods because the price is unacceptable. Modern society has decided that human welfare, psychological health, and individual life preservation are more important than creating optimal killing effectiveness. The evidence proves that ancient warriors achieved killing efficiency that modern fighters can't approach, but the reasons why reveal something profound about human nature and social evolution. Samurai swordsmanship represents humanity's peak achievement in individual combat lethality. Not because it was mystical or supernatural, but because an entire civilization dedicated centuries to optimizing human development for one specific purpose: killing other humans as efficiently as possible. Modern martial arts are less lethal not because we lack the knowledge or capability to create more effective killing methods, but because we consciously chose to prioritize human development over combat effectiveness. We evolved beyond treating efficient killing as the highest martial achievement. The same species that created systematic training methods for producing perfect killing machines also chose to abandon those methods in favor of systems that emphasize personal growth, physical fitness, sport competition, and self-defense. This represents genuine social evolution, the conscious decision to value human life over technical effectiveness. Contemporary martial artists train for health, discipline, competition, and personal development. These are qualitatively different objectives that produce different results. Modern fighters are healthier, happier, and more well-rounded individuals than historical warriors who were optimized purely for killing. The gap between samurai swordsmanship and modern martial arts exists because we decided that creating efficient killers isn't worth the human cost required. The training methods that produced samurai effectiveness would be considered systematic abuse and psychological damage by contemporary standards. This reflects our species' capacity for moral evolution and the conscious choice to move beyond pure lethality as the measure of martial excellence. We understand how to create more effective killers. We choose not to, because we value human welfare over combat effectiveness. What modern training methods do you think come closest to ancient combat effectiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this changed your perspective on martial arts and human nature, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating mysteries.